Wild West was more than saloons, standoffs, and dusty trails. It was a land teetering between civilization and chaos, a place where banks were built faster than laws to protect them, and outlaws became legends. But behind the myths were real people, real crimes, and moments of staggering boldness that reshaped history. Today, we're diving deep into the most daring train and bank heists the West ever saw, and the outlaws, both men and women, who pulled them off. Our story begins with a name almost too infamous to believe: Butch Cassidy. Born Robert Leroy Parker in 1866 in Utah, Cassidy didn't start out an outlaw, but once he turned to crime, he didn't look back. In the 1890s, Cassidy formed the Wild Bunch with Harry Longabaugh, better known as the Sundance Kid. Together, they orchestrated over 20 robberies across the U.S. and South America, netting what would be over $10 million today. One of their boldest hits came in 1899 in Wilcox, Wyoming. The target? A Union Pacific train. The gang waited at a trestle bridge and flagged down the train with a red signal. Once stopped, they detached the engine, blew the bridge behind them, and then used dynamite to crack open the mail car safe. Inside, $35,000 in cash and gold. $1 million payday in modern terms. They vanished into the Wyoming wilderness before lawmen could blink. But the Union Pacific Railroad had a long memory. They called in the infamous Pinkerton Detective Agency, who pursued the gang relentlessly. Agents, including the deadly Tom Horn, scoured the frontier, but Cassidy and Sundance slipped through their fingers again and again. Eventually, the duo disappeared, but not into the shadows. They boarded a ship to South America, along with Sundance's companion, Etta Place. From Argentina to Bolivia, they carried on robbing banks and living the outlaw dream. Until 1908. That year, two masked Americans held up a silver mine payroll courier in Bolivia. Later, authorities traced them to a hideout in San Vicente. A gunfight erupted. When the dust settled, two bodies were found. They were never positively identified, but most believe it was the end for Cassidy and Sundance. Or was it? Rumors still swirl that Cassidy lived out his days under an alias in the Pacific Northwest, or that Sundance escaped and died an old man in South America. To this day, no one knows for sure. Before Cassidy ever drew a six-shooter, Jesse James had already become a household name. A former Confederate guerrilla, Jesse and his brother Frank emerged from the ashes of the Civil War disillusioned and dangerous. With fellow former fighters, they formed the James Younger Gang, a group that blurred the lines between vengeance and villainy. Their first high-profile hit came in Gallatin, Missouri. Jesse believed the bank manager was the man responsible for his wartime commander's death. He walked in, shot the man on the spot, and realized, too late, he had the wrong guy. The gang got away with barely $600, but Jesse's name was burned into headlines across the country. The James Younger Gang escalated their attacks. In 1873, they derailed a Rock Island train in Adair, Iowa, hoping for a $75,000 gold shipment. The crash killed two crewmen, but the gang only found $3,000. Still, it was the first robbery of a moving train in U.S. history, and it made them feared coast to coast. But fame has its cost. In 1876, they tried to rob two banks at once in Northfield, Minnesota. Locals fought back with rifles. The ambush was a disaster. The gang scattered, wounded, and hunted. Jesse survived. But in 1882, he let down his guard. While hanging a picture in his home, Jesse James was shot in the back of the head by Robert Ford, one of his own men. Ford hoped to collect the bounty. Instead, he was charged with murder and only spared by a controversial governor's pardon. The folk hero had fallen, but the legend was born. Some outlaws didn't need a long career to make their mark. Crawford Goldsby, better known as Cherokee Bill, was one of them. Born to a Cherokee African-American mother and a Buffalo Soldier father, Bill's brief but brutal reign of terror began in 1894. After a personal dispute turned deadly, he joined forces with the Cook brothers, Jim and Bill, and began robbing post offices, general stores, and trains across Indian Territory. Bill was just 18 years old. A manhunt swept across Oklahoma, and by 1895, Bill was captured and sentenced to death. But even behind bars, he didn't go quietly. A smuggled pistol led to another murder, another escape attempt, and more infamy. On March 17, 1896, Cherokee Bill was hanged in Fort Smith, Arkansas. He was only 20. His last words, "I came here to die, not to make a speech." The Dalton brothers began as lawmen, but soon switched sides. Between 1890 and 1892, Bob, Emmett, and Grat Dalton, along with their posse, robbed banks and trains across the Midwest. In October 1892, they attempted their most ambitious heist yet, 2 banks in Coffeyville, Kansas. At the same time, the gang split into 2 teams. Locals recognized them almost immediately and grabbed their guns. Within minutes, a gunfight exploded in the streets. The Daltons barely made it out of the buildings. By the time the smoke cleared, Bob and Grat Dalton were dead. So were 2 of their crew and 4 townspeople. Emmett Dalton, riddled with bullets, survived and was sentenced to life in prison. He was later pardoned and went on to write books about the gang's exploits. A Hollywood ending, in a sense, but Coffeyville was the last great act for the Dalton gang. Not all Wild West outlaws wore spurs and sported mustaches. One of the boldest was a woman named Pearl Hart. Born in Canada, Pearl made her way to Arizona by the late 1890s. With her partner Joe Boot, she began robbing unsuspecting men in back alley scams. But Pearl wanted bigger scores. In 1899, the duo held up a stagecoach outside Globe, Arizona. Their haul, $400. Their escape? Not so impressive. Lost in the desert, they were quickly caught. But Pearl became a media sensation. Charming, well-spoken, and defiant, she captivated the public. Her all-male jury gave her just 5 years. She escaped briefly, got caught again, and eventually vanished from public record entirely. Not every outlaw wielded a gun. Some used science, or at least pretended to. Enter William J.A. Bailey, failed Harvard student, self-proclaimed doctor, and salesman of radium water. He promised it cured everything, from fatigue to manhood issues. His tonic, tap water laced with radioactive material, it wasn't medicine, it was poison. And yet, Bailey became rich off the sales, giving lectures across the West and selling so-called radiant health belts. Eventually, he was arrested for fraud, not for nuclear crimes, though he probably deserved it. He wasn't a gunslinger, but he robbed thousands with a smile. The Wild West gave birth to legends, but behind every name was a person. Behind every myth, a truth more strange and compelling than fiction. Whether it was Butch Cassidy slipping away into the Andes, or Jesse James betrayed in his own home, these stories remind us that history is anything but boring.